Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This vlog is pertaining to flat earth conspiracy theory. I know the proponents of such idea view what's being propagated by mainstream science and their shells as the conspiracy beguiling the masses through this opposite notion, which is spherical earth, and also Darwinian evolution, which plays a significant factor to such plot. This vlog is dedicated to a Muslim friend who has incited me to produce it. He seemed to have invested so much into this flat earth conspiracy theory to the point of convincing himself that it is true. However, such conviction is not based on knowledge but rather a flawed psyche, as it's nothing but a psychological state projected to manipulate their next victim, as they themselves have been beguiled into it heedlessly. The more my dear friend talks about it, the more I realize that it's nothing but a psychological issue rather than a scientific one. When I mention other flat earthers and their beliefs on the matter, he seems to shun them as if he possesses more knowledge than them. But due to such impulsive attitude, he ends up sounding just like them, incoherent and irrational. So without any further ado, let me tackle the notion from a psychological perception of what I have gleaned from my experience with flat earth adherents and their attitude. I would like to be more systematic in this vlog to help the Muslim listeners understand why such conspiracy theory should be tackled from a philosophical and psychological stance rather than confuting it with astrophysics itself head on, as the notion is more psychological and epistemological than scientific. What I mean by psychological is the ignorance being spewed by these conspiracy theorists. It stems from paranoia, compounded ignorance, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and colonial amnesia, specifically if you're a Muslim. The paranoia stems from ignorance. It could be the mob mentality, adhering to the norms, or in such case, what's countering mainstream science being popularized and propagated, misrepresenting academia. Mainly the four horsemen, such as Dan Dennett, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Richard Dawkins. It is true that these popularizers of scientism, and not science itself, have beguiled a lot of heedless people with their scientism narrative into becoming atheists, mainly through their reluctance of their false narrative concerning Darwinism. We evolved from ape-type creatures, thus God does not exist. What the ignorant flat earthers have done was to counter such false propaganda with another asinine propaganda, which is equivalent to Dawkins, and that is, the earth is spherical, thus God does not exist. They want to hide God from us, as Mark Sargent would state, and many more would regurgitate his claim. This is what engendered such psychological state. Mainstream science is lying to us, and we need to hold these shells accountable. But instead of delving into the philosophy of science, specifically the philosophy of biology concerning Darwinian evolution, these ultra-crepidarians took a huge left turn and crashed. They delved so deep into this unsophisticated investigation that compounded ignorance and the Dunning-Kruger effect were the outcome. As they become heedless of such state, it becomes hard to get them out of it. Dear Muslim flat earther, please do not fall into these futile, senseless, pointless, useless squabbles pertaining to a celestial object's shape to determine God's ontology. God's ontology is not dependent on a celestial object's shape, but is rather ascertained by a much more sophisticated approach, which involves a philosophical and mystical endeavor, rather than a shape of a planet gleaned through pseudo-intellectuals. A true Muslim who is theophilosophically savvy would never fall into such predicaments with these type of conspiracy theories, as this notion is nothing but an embarrassment to his own iman, faith, and God-given cognitive faculties, rendering his psycho-spirit immature and heedless of the disciplines required for these type of inquiries. The Muslim flat earther, if he wishes to believe in flat earth, he may remain to do so, as long as he does not correlate such notion to the sublime's ontology, which may deem him as a heretic, as he has made God's ontology dependent on a celestial object's shape. This may deem him as a mushrik, a polytheist. Thus, the notion of such conspiracy theory of the earth being flat, revealing God's existence, while the notion of the earth being a globe, hiding God's existence, is nothing but a mockery and belittlement of our God-given rational faculties. It is asinine, ludicrous, and just silly. To understand why, as a Muslim flat earther, you may be suffering from colonial amnesia, you must first understand why the white man decided to come up with this conspiracy theory and reborn it in this day and age. First of all, this is not an Islamic problem, as such idea does not take you outside of the fold of Islam either way, as long as it's not predicated on God's ontology. Historically speaking, in Europe, the Catholic Church was dogmatic and in control, as it was preventing man from thinking. When Galileo emerged on the scene due to his heliocentric model instead of a geocentric model, he was deemed a heretic and was prosecuted by the Catholic Church. Such notion has nothing to do with Islamic history, as Islam did not prevent man from thinking. It encouraged man to seek knowledge and to ask God for knowledge in abundance. Even if we had a few scholars who believed in flat earth, they did not make the same unsophisticated argument as these Cretans. If I'm not mistaken, more Islamic theologians and philosophers believed in a globe, but no one deemed anyone a heretic, as it wasn't a creedal matter. It dealt more so with hermeneutics. This is where the Muslim flat earther developed his colonial amnesia, imitating a Western unacademic movement just to battle mainstream science. But this is not the way of doing things. You are following the ignoramuses blindly, due to compounded ignorance embedded in a heedless psyche that cannot reflect upon its own self to spot its mistakes and flaws. Dear Muslim flat earther, if you are serious about knowledge, please follow the way of the scholars, and know that every discipline has its own epistemic weight. Since this whole duplicitous movement's aim is to help people believe in God, as you presume that atheism is the fastest growing religion, nonetheless, Islam is the fastest growing religion. Know that this is a scandalous approach which holds no epistemic weight, and when it's debunked scientifically, it could cause more harm than good. There are more theists who believe in a globe than atheists. You, my friend, have stated through your colonial amnesic heedless lens, which has been liberalized due to a white liberal hegemonic influence, that faith is your personal belief and no one can challenge people's faith. Yet you utter with the same mouth a hypocritical contradiction that you want to put an end to atheism with this foolish notion of flat earth, that people should not believe in God, that atheists should abandon their atheism, which is academically speaking the belief of God or gods not existing. If faith is your personal belief and cannot be challenged academically, as you have proclaimed, then why change an atheist's belief in no God or gods? Especially with such ridiculous conspiracy theory. You, my friend, have dug yourself a hole and shot yourself in the foot. Dear Muslim flat earther, understand that as philosophy champions science, science champions history. And while philosophy champions both of these disciplines, it is not completely off the hook as mysticism champions philosophy. Since this Western white man's conspiracy theory has beguiled you as it proclaims God can be revealed through a celestial object's shape only if it's flat but not spherical, this entails that a head or a president of such movement is a complete ignoramus, as he's superimposing a Eurocentric historical biblical lens on the rest of humanity, like the mistaken Orientalist, and that he's philosophically inept, as he does not fathom the philosophy of science, as these disciplines are underpinned with philosophical underpinnings. Thus, every discipline has its limit. For example, philosophy deals with reasoning such as deduction, induction, and abduction. Science only deals with induction. History deals with abduction, like in a court of law. Deductive reasoning is deduced via axioms or general principles. Inductive reasoning is determined from a set of data to make a general inference. Abductive reasoning seeks the simplest and most likely conclusion from a set of observation. It is through these methods of reasoning that one determines the epistemic weight of the discipline. But since a clear sound intuition champions intellect, mysticism rises above all these disciplines, as it brings you closer to the sublime. As Jesus, son of Mary, in the Bible indicated, the Father and I are one. So what does science based on methodological naturalism have to do with God's ontology? Whether it's belief or disbelief. Not to prolong this vlog any further, I hope you understand this message, and after coming to fruition with it, you will acknowledge the claim that science is trying to hide God through a globe holds no epistemic weight nor justification whatsoever, and it is nothing but a senseless, pointless, useless claim announced globally. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.